Oh, well, I think one of the reasons we're projecting this on 35
I'm
millimeter
so glad you brought that
is
up.
because we want to point to that quality of this film. It's somehow I think about this movie. It's a movie that knows it's a movie and likes being a movie.
Very excited to have you guys here to talk about Normal. For those who haven't had a chance to see the film yet, like, how would you describe the plot of the film?
It's the story of a guy who has lost his trust of himself, his instincts. And in the course of interacting with the people in this small town who are hiding something from him, and he's desperately trying to avoid seeing it. And then his hand is forced. And then once he sees it, he has to re-engage with the situation around him, the world around him. And then there's a flip-floppery of allegiances that is very surprising and probably a bit inscrutable if you're trying to boil it down to themes, as a critic might try to do. You're a little.
You calling me out right now? We're just
I'm
start
just
off at the
saying.
top.
No, I'm just saying that when asked to define sort of the subtextual
Sure.
theme, I'm like, well, there's like 6 of them, and they're
Yeah.
a little bit conflicting, and that's what's great about it.
Well, from the perspective, you wrote the films.
Yeah, yeah.
So what was the kind of impetus of being like, I have an idea?
I grew up in Madison, Wisconsin, which was considered the big city for Wisconsin, right? But my relatives lived in Wisconsin Dells. I mean, Wisconsin Dells and Wisconsin Rapids and Mazomanie. So I knew that small town appeal.
Mhm.
And, in doing road trips throughout the Midwest, the Rust Belt is still a very real thing where you roll through a town that, there's a line in there where he's like an antique store that antiques or a medical center or this, and it's true. Dialysis center, and ultimately, um, I love small towns. That's where I grew up, but also the idea of as a kid walking past that one store that for some reason sells just the most inane crap, but it's always open. Like, how is it making
Yeah.
its money? And we all have places like that. That was the seed, the impetus, the genesis for this of going, well, maybe what they're really doing is this. And then like, the Bad Day at Block Rock, all of this, Stepford Wives, all these comps we have is the town's holding a secret. And to his point, in Nobody, if there's a house on fire, Hutch is going to run into it and hopefully, fight anyone who's in there. In Normal, he's going to look to the house on fire going, I don't know. And then he'll hear a scream.
It's not that much fire.
And then he'll scream and kind of go,
sort of snowing. He might go out on his own.
I love the notion, and it was fun creating with Bob, of a begrudging hero.
Yeah, and Ben, you've made so many films that have like I mean often anti-heroes, but I would say that this character is less of an anti-hero than like say High Rise or Free Fire or Sightseers, just to compare. So I'm curious, like you're like, I want to hook into this.
I mean, for me, I've been trying over a period of many years to having made one of the most negative and pessimistic films of all time, Kill List. Well, I've been trying to move the ocean liner towards the positive, but it takes a long time. Sightseers was a step in that direction, still turned out really dark and horrible. So that was a failure in that respect.
Funny, though.
Well, yeah, it has that.
You got some levity
and
there.
then slowly moving forward, and that's what making something like The Meg is part of, because it's like it's poppy and bright, like a kid's movie, but fun. This was a similar thing. I looked at it and went, well, it's in the kind of range of things I will still want to make. It's basically has the DNA of a cowboy movie, and it has the white hat, black hat kind of style. It has a sheriff, which is a point of morality in the middle, but it still speaks to my kind of slightly twisted kind of sense of morality as well. So it was, it was very straightforward in that respect, but also it was complicated, which I really liked.
I think that's what draws me into it. I'm glad you referenced the cowboy thing, because like obviously he's a sheriff and that's iconographical, but it really did feel like almost like a flip of High Noon.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear from your perspective, Mark. Like, what was it that attracted you to the project and like made you want to kind of pull through all the work that it is building something like this?
I mean, the points of attraction for me were starting with Bob and Derek and I had so much fun conceiving and bringing Nobody to life, that franchise to life. And we knew we enjoyed playing together. We knew that we respected, the tenet best idea wins. And in this idea, and I'll get to the joy of Ben showing up for the party. We said, why don't we do something on our own, bet on ourselves, go outside the studio system, and we're all producing, but Bob is going to star, Derek's going to write, and I'm going to, produce, and in terms of the lead roles, and that there was so much joy in thinking about us putting our superpowers to use in a way that worked. One of the most valuable things to me in putting a project together is the architecture. Like, how are you putting the pieces together so that everyone is charged and excited and wants to meet in the middle? And so many projects that have issues are when that's not done. The base floor of the building
Right.
isn't constructed properly, and in this case it was so clean, and I could see it, and so I was able to put all my energy into that because I believed in that concept. And the one piece missing was the brilliant filmmaker to bring it to life and to join as a partner. And so when we found Ben, you can see you can feel like that it just worked that way.
What's so fun about watching the film in part is that we have certain expectations attached to your casting, and because nobody already exists and because you have that
Yeah.
kind of framework built in. But then the film doesn't start off where you might expect a film called
Right.
Normal. It's about a sheriff to start off. We start off with the Yakuza.
Yeah.
So right out the gate, you guys kind of have us off balance.
That's right. That opening really does throw you off balance, doesn't it? But they're so important at the core of this story, and they matter so much that we had to see them, I think.
And you fought for that opening.
Yeah.
Oh, what was the alternate idea?
Well, just not have
Just-
that.
Oh, wow. So it just becomes a total. That's
Yeah.
A couple drafts didn't have that.
Okay.
We just started with him coming to town.
Right.
40 minutes in Tokyo, wasn't it?
He just comes to town, and I could see the value of that.
Sure.
I could see that. That might work, absolutely. But I think this works better.
Yeah.
I think that then when it does become about Ulysses teaming up with some people, and I don't want to spoil this film, and the Yakuza being at opposite ends of that, it matters there.
For tension, isn't it? It's a question mark across the whole first 40 minutes.
Right.
You're always thinking, oh, what about that thing? Oh, God, and that helps all the drama.
And
of
then
that.
there's two other reasons why I think it's great. If you didn't do it, there's a chance that the kind of comic tone of the suspense sequence, the first 40 minutes, 35 minutes, I'm just afraid. I always want people to know what they're getting when they're coming to the movie. So after that first 2 minutes, you're like, oh,
Yeah.
it's going to bleed on
Yeah,
screen.
yeah.
I'm not going to be shocked when that starts happening because that right away they told me we're doing this.
Yeah. It's like
So
the beginning
I
of a
like
slasher movie.
that
we have
very
the,
much.
that
And
point of
then
entry.
I like the third reason is I like a Yakuza boss saying Minnesota
Yeah.
That's great.
just because it's funny and
And see, what I loved about that scene, and that's what made me adore that scene, is the scene with the guy going huh, with his finger, and then it's instantly letting the audience know in that opening scene, it's just going to be funny and brutal and yet kind of funny, which I loved.
yeah, that is good. That guy is great,
He
by
was
the
great.
way, that
Yeah.
actor.
I think it's really fun, guys. Rewatching it, I got to experience that again, and I was just like, they make him look a little bit. You guys chose somebody who's. It almost like he's gonna make it through the situation because he looks more different than the other two. He seems
Yes.
singular.
Doesn't he?
Yeah. So then I think the way that scene plays out, it hits harder because I feel like you've set us what so much about that scene is a proper expectation that there's
Yeah.
gonna be humor, it's gonna be dark, there will
Right.
be blood. But then that is a nice reversal that it's we're also not going to give you exactly what you're expecting.
To me, that's just that. That's we said when Ben came aboard, we said we want a Ben Wheatley film, and the way you shot that scene, because that scene could have been messed up so easily tonally. It could have been too corny, it could have been too serious, but like the choice of actors and the tone with which you struck that really set up the entire movie.
Ben, for you, when you like started reading the script, like, was there a particular scene that you're like, I know how to do this and I'll build from here?
It was more from conversations before. I understood the script pretty well, but it was more the approach that was being put forward. The approach and the strategy to make the movie had kind of happened hand in hand with the writing of the script. And that was to put Bob's action in the forefront, to go, it's Bob Odenkirk doing it for real. And then that spreads out to every aspect of the film, so that if there's stunts, we're doing stunts. We're not doing any CG as much as we can do within the bounds of safety. And we're going back to trying to make a movie like a movie would have been made in the 70s and 80s, rather than kind of, I think generally like production has sped up. We have less time to make movies and more complicated things to do in movies. And what happens is then types of post-production and reliance on effects, on CG effects starts to come in, and then you start to see it around the edges of things. And you only have to see it a tiny bit and you go, oh God, why did they do that? I was watching the Peckinpah's The Getaway on the plane. And it was
As he intended.
Yeah, on my phone. But it was, I noticed in that and it shouldn't be a big surprise, but he doesn't use any process shots. So when they're driving, they're really driving in all those shots. And I was thinking, oh, that's really great, because, and I've been guilty of this myself, of doing process shots because they're just easier, and it's a pain in the ass shooting in cars. But when you see it for real, you just go, yeah, there's no arguing with it. There's no. And even if it's done really well, and but there's like a 0.5%, you go, oh God, yeah, they were just sitting in a stage.
And you snap out of it a
Yeah,
bit.
yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, those are the movies I grew up with there's just like the squibs and the things, and there is just, I think there's certainly a nostalgia to that, to be perfectly honest.
Oh, well, I think one of the reasons we're projecting this on 35 millimeter
I'm so glad you brought that
is
up.
because we want to point to that quality of this film. That somehow I think about this movie. It's a movie that knows it's a movie and likes being a movie. And that's so weird. What do you mean? I mean, all movies, if they had awareness, would know they are movies. But it's just like everything about it. There's a satisfaction in I hope that we're achieving, and I think that we are achieving, that comes from the movie. So much of satisfaction in art is there are cues that you get in the first frames that pay off in the last frames, or that pay off over the journey. And the cue here, and it might too be that opening with the Yakuza, is that we're making a movie story here. This is going to be an invented movie story. You could never see this in real life. And now we're going to give you that movie that's going to tie up this loose end, this very loose end that you can't imagine connecting ever to life in some little town in Minnesota. And so I think it's rewarding in that way. It's one reason we're showing it on 35 millimeters, to point that it's the reason for the poster that we have. The poster is really a throwback visual, and I hope in the best possible way.
That's such an interesting point, because like part of when I grew up with practical effects, and like, I know people will be like, oh, that's fake or whatever, but it was like there was something about it being in a real space and being able to like see that.
Yeah.
And also playing out of South by is like Ready or Not, and they talked a lot at the Q&A about actually shooting blood at the women, because like there's recurring that people explode in that movie. You guys have explosions.
Ready or Not.
Spoilers. Ready or Not 2, technically.
Oh, I don't
Yeah.
know it.
Still not ready.
Still not ready. Still figuring it out.
Readier.
But there's just something about actually getting to watch people like get hit with gore, or actually getting to see the things that it's not like CG. Like I don't want to get intellectual about it and be like, I think that my brain really thinks it's real. But I think that because I grew up with those stories, I inherently warm to that. Even when it's gnarly, even when it's, because it's like you're playing in a real space with me, and you're not like giving me a shellac of something fake.
A thing with effects is, and there's a lot of stuff online about how terrible effects are, blah, blah, blah. But you only spot the ones that are bad, for starters. So all the good CG, you don't see it, and no one complains about it. But the thing about using real practical effects is that it doesn't really matter if you could do it better in CG, which you might be able to, but it'll be hellishly expensive. But also the reactions and performances are all tied up together with practical effects. So when Bob's firing the rocket launcher and the cars explode, we see it from behind, the cars exploding in front of him. That happened to him. That was a real thing, and the heat's off that and all that stuff is all real, So and that in a way is easier to do than CG.
I will say this: I have never done stunt work. Shocker, I know. Like, you look at the physique and you're like, what?
You have the tattoos though, man.
I do. Like, that's how I flex. But I did go to the Waterworld stunt show.
Oh yeah.
And the fire effects in that, I was way back in those bleachers. Whoo! Like, my question for that is genuinely like, how do you maintain a character? Because I will say, as me, I'm not an actor, I get it, whatever. But like, I got hit with that, and my immediate response was just to go like, oh.
Well, you use it. I mean, that's great. It's great when things have an element of reality, like heat from a fire, or if they're punching, sometimes I'll say, hit me a little, at least a little. I want to feel it,
Careful, man. That's how
but
Houdini died.
That helps me to do the reaction. Yeah.
Sure.
So it's only good, I think, except, obviously if you feel like you're in danger, but I didn't feel like I was in danger. People were good.
We have plenty of the natural element of cold on this movie, so you could use that all you want.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And I did love when we were in the main street where he's shooting the machine gun. On the day of, he shoots the machine gun all the way down and cut, and Bob just goes, he just chuckles, goes, that was cool.
It's fun to shoot a fake
cool.
machine gun. And when I was a kid, we used to get guns for toys, like toy guns.
Sure, yeah.
All the time. Every year, we get a couple of them every year.
Yeah.
Machine guns we got them. And we'd run in the forest and play army.
Yeah, totally. Because I have parents who are very concerned about
This is
raising a
even
proper young lady, so I did not have a toy gun, but I did have a Nerf sharpshooter, and
that's good.
that was so, because it made a big click sound,
Yeah.
and then it would shoot like a little rubber dart. Like,
When are they going to do Nerf gas?
Oh jeez. Nerf gas. It's fun once.
dude, that was like maybe the most Ben Wheatley thing I've ever heard you say. Oh man, that's great.
Smells like strawberries.
You guys still have time. You can like make your deal with Nerf and get that out in time for the normal Nerf gas. Wow. Yeah, no, I think there's something to that. And I think like, I mean, there's so much gunplay in movies. It's such a big part of it. And what I think is interesting within the film is you're able to kind of address Americans being like very into guns in a way that plays as a critique, but isn't like finger wagging.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, the movie is touching on a lot of subjects.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's kind of tying them all together and leaving them out there for you to look at. And the questions only becomes the people, the characters, and their intentions and their ability to gather around the best possible way forward. And that's really all it's about.
Mm-hmm.
In the end, his goal is to leave the town the way he found it. And in a fundamental way, he did that.
Yeah. Well, part of the moral gray area of this is what it feels so much like a Ben Wheatley movie, where it's like, sometimes you give us characters who are kind of like morally reprehensible, but they're fun. And like in this, it's like, I think what's so interesting about this character, okay, I'm going to make this comparison and then I'm immediately going to backpedal a little bit. But it reminds me of No Country for Old Men. But I want to say that in a way of, in that it is about a person who is realizing he is facing something that is so beyond his realm of understanding. But I don't want people, I feel like people have such a big idea of that. I don't want people coming to normal thinking it's going to be No Country. So that's why I'm saying like I want to pedal that back a bit.
Yeah.
But what I appreciate about both of those things is it is a version of a Western that is like more baroque and more restructuring and more evaluating the morals we have as the arbiters of law. And so that's what made it so exciting for me. Because like I got into Westerns like late because it was like when I was a kid, my dad watched them. I was just like, it didn't feel like a space for me. And then like Deadwood was a real game changer. And I went back and watched all the old. Oh yeah. Like I go hard into Deadwood. And then I like went back and watched all the old stuff. And it's like where before it didn't feel like there was a space for me. Like maybe because I was, I grew up as a girl and I wasn't allowed to play with guns and things. It was like that wasn't a girl thing. Like these themes of like, this is what society is saying is right. And this is what this person's trying to hold up to. But sometimes society is failing in their own standards. Or sometimes like the sheriff doesn't know how to be the noble person that like we want to see them be. And it's like, those were always the Westerns that really got me. Because I feel like the idea that we create this cowboy who understands what the right path is and is just going to pursue that nobly, even if it's going to risk death. Like, that's cool. I
Sure,
can't relate
that
to
can be
that.
great, but it's,
Right.
yeah, it's not the guy you relate to. You relate to the fallible person who's doubts themselves, and in this case, he doubts his instincts. And
Also, he's bought into it, and then gone down the whole path of it, and then failed at it. You know, he thought he was John Wayne, and he turned out he wasn't. You know,
Exactly.
and then he's kind of depressed and in a funk about it, and has to claw his way back from that. And he's clawing his way back doesn't start until he starts to care again.
And that's such an interesting thing too, because like in the beginning, you say in the letter to your wife about how caring less has become a coping mechanism, essentially. And like that definitely hit me. There's so much we don't need to get into specifics. There's so much
Yeah.
going on in the world that sometimes I'm like, if I could just tune out and care less, that would probably be easier for me to
well,
like sleep
it's
at night.
supposedly recommended. I think it's recommended that you find the degree to which you need to tune out
Sure.
for your own mental health.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely too
Yeah,
unwanted.
it's
That's
fine.
another podcast. But
Yeah.
but what I think is interesting about the film is it makes the argument that there are points where like, okay, but now you got to engage.
Yes.
And I think allowing us on that journey, it's like, it's exciting from like a drama perspective, but also from like a psychological
Yeah.
perspective of like, we get to go like, right, there are times you got to tap in.
That's it.
But also that lots of things could accidentally kill you at any point, which is another thing I really enjoyed in the script, which is it's so laissez-faire about humanity, you know, that things will just kill you. Not even, you know, goodies and baddies. It's just stuff will drop on you, you know. And I think that is a good message, you know, as part of the general kind of.
Genuinely, I think that's very true. I think it's this attitude of like, tomorrow's not guaranteed, the next second's not guaranteed, act accordingly.
Yeah.
And like, it's interesting because I do think the film gets into like, that means different things to different people.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of different sides to understand or appreciate this story on, I think.
I mean,
Yeah.
like what I love too is we've always talked about it was all the other characters think they're the good guy. All the other characters think they're the lead actor in this movie. And even when they die, their last thought is, wait, what?
Yeah.
Me?
Is this film ending now?
That's the dark ending.
That's wow. Yeah.
Well, when Billy, Deputy Mike, takes the thing and goes, it's just a firecracker.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, you can
Flair.
see those movies.
And he
for all those
goes,
characters,
or no, he puts it out and he goes,
I did it.
I did it. I'm a hero. And he doesn't get to finish the word hero.
That's such a good point. Yeah, that's what I thought was so fun about this, because like I think you can totally just watch it as like I want to watch like a bonkers action movie.
Yeah.
And like, you know,
You
there's
can just enjoy it on that level.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
but like I am that person who is definitely being like, but what's the meaning of
Yeah,
this?
well, I think my personal feeling is there's a lot of subject matter up for conversation. you know?
Yeah.
And that's sort of all there is to it. You can come at this from 1,000 angles, but it's also, you know, small town American culture versus world culture and the ways in which it feels like you can't have both, that one's going to steal from the other.
That's a very good point.
You know, you can't live in both, which is arguably true and untrue, but people are feeling it, that it's true. How can I exist as a small town if the bigger world is so important now? If we're all living in the global world economy, how do I matter? We don't matter anymore. But that's not true. It's just how it feels,
Yeah.
which means I guess it is true. Because if that's what you feel is true, then that's the universe you live in.
That's what I love about genre movies, though, is when you see it for the first time as a kid, you see it as an awesome action movie, right? For me, it was Lethal Weapon. And then later in life, you watch Lethal Weapon again in your 20s, and you begin to pick up these awesome lines and scenes where you're like, this is super sad and depressing. And then you realize the last time you see it when, you know, your 30s and 40s, and you think when Riggs and Murtaugh are outside his house and he invites him in for dinner.
I'm not crazy. I know. Oh, good. Let's eat.
And it's a sweet little moment. You're like, that's the most important thing in the movie, right? Like even with the line when I was a little kid, when he goes, I'm gonna slaughter it, but he's like, I shot a man in the back at 80 yards with a shotgun into the wind.
It's the only thing I was ever good at.
When you're a kid, you hear that line, you're like, that's cool.
Yeah.
When you're an adult, you're like, that is the most depressing thing a human being can say. And a lot of things that we do here is we're going for one audience, but there are lines in there that are very important to each of us that you might not pick up at an age or with a first viewing, but at a certain amount of time, we get to say things by saying it, you know?
You know, you'd ask what drew me to this movie. What got me excited about it is one thing that I think about is, you know, Ulysses showing up in this town, this small town. He doesn't know anybody, and it makes me I enjoy watching the journey of seeing who he's actually going to become a friend with, who he's going to connect with, and take the ride with. And it's an incredible unveiling of each character that we meet along the way to discover who he actually chooses. And it's obviously very surprising who he winds up choosing as his partners. And I thought that was allegorical.
Yeah, yeah. To take it back to, I keep taking back to Western. That's like a me thing. But what I thought was so neat is it plays with these ideas of genre, of white hats and black hats and all the thing, and then by distorting all of that, to your point, it's not didactic. Like it's talking about a bunch of things,
Yeah.
but it's not
No.
finger wagging or giving
Not
us
at
an
all.
answer. It's
No.
playing in this sandbox of being even an American small town is confusing in a world where, because of the way things have developed, everybody can have access to anything in a weird way.
Yeah, and so many, as Derek was saying, I also wanted it to have the feeling that it has of so many small towns in America where it is pretty empty. And yet in this one, there's a yarn shop that's pretty jam-packed full of yarn, and how the fuck is she keeping this thing going? Who's buying this yarn? and so it's idyllic, but you're going, yeah, but why? Why do they get to still have this everything that they seem to have? And
What's the cost of that? Yeah.
And
I
what's
think
the
it was
cost?
important looking at it as well as to like them all. And I wanted to like all the characters, and I wasn't coming at it from a point of view of undermining them as a director and how all those choices were made and how the performances were done, that they wouldn't, you knew that they'd made bad decisions, but they weren't necessarily bad people, And I think that was part of how we were managing the tone and thinking about it all the time of going, we don't want to make Ulysses really murderous and destroy the town and take glee in doing it, because he's not happy about any of it. And and he's worried about each one, even though they might be trying to kill him. It's still there's a line there which is not about just going into full on wraith slaughter mode and kind of killing everybody, which is not much fun. I don't know.
Yeah, it's really interesting because like rewatching it, I realized there's like one decision that is made, which is when they go past the till, that if that hadn't happened, the movie is completely different.
Right.
Like the interim of those weeks would be,
Yeah.
a quirky comedy.
Yeah. Although Ulysses, when he's looking at the death certificate, he knows something's not right. And then he just puts it away. He does ask about it later because he can't help himself.
It would be a mini series.
Yeah.
Maybe about 12 episodes in, and they go, Gunderson was killed.
Well, I'm glad you guys opted for this version. I thought it was really fun. That's just about our time. Is there anything else you want to tell us about the movie before people get to see it?
April 17th. We're going to be in your theater nearby.
35 millimeter.
Come see Normal.
Please.
Yes.
Yeah,
Enjoy
we can't
with
wait
friends.
to share it with you. Get some popcorn.
Support theater.
Sit
have some
back. And
fun.
it's going to go nuts right in front of you.
It works if you go on your own first and really enjoy it, but then tell all your family about it, then take them.
Well, I like that.
Go together. And if you want to save money, sorry, exhibitors, preloaded popcorn. Eat that at home.
I've never heard of pre-gaming popcorn.
Wow.
Wow.
You can save half the price of the evening out. There you go. Even do a few hot dogs as well. Out of a jar instead of...
Out the jar. Where are you getting hot dogs in a jar?
Don't you have them here? Sure.
Is that a thing?
This must be the home of hot
They're
dogs.
packed in plastic here.
Wrapped in plastic. How's that better than in a jar?
America, mother.
Deal with it.